Hello, families. Welcome. This is the November newsletter for the superintendent, and you're listening to A Minute with McGann, a way that I provide information out to our family members with additional information in the written portion of the superintendent's newsletter. So, happy November. We were so lucky that the weather cooperated during our Thanksgiving weekend. The weather was a little cool but dry, allowed for our families to come together, and even welcoming so many of the college students back to our community to be at home with their families. These shorter days and earlier sunsets beckon us back into our kitchens to gather around the table with our families and really be thankful for all the togetherness that we can have this holiday season. So I appreciate the time that you're going to spend with me today in this Minute with McGann. I'm going to highlight two topics. One is chronic absenteeism and learning in our schools. The second is the ESSER funds, otherwise known as the American Rescue Funds. I'm going to talk about that. But before I get into those two very important topics, I must take a moment to recognize and highlight a new member of the Flemington-Raritan Regional School District administrative team. And that is the Vice Principal at Robert Hunter, Mrs. Lindsay Shervanian. We welcome Mrs. Shervanian, who was recommended by the hiring committee at Robert Hunter to be the new vice principal there. She comes to us from Francis A. Daymar Elementary School, where she was a support teacher and a Daymar Dolphin. And now she joins the Raccoons at Robert Hunter. So congratulations to Mrs. Lindsay Shervanian, the new vice principal at Robert Hunter. So let's talk about chronic absenteeism and specifically how that affects learning. We learned from a 2018 report that was published by Attendix Works and a woman named Mrs. Chetty that half of all of the students who miss 2 to 4 days of school within the first month of school traditionally go on to be chronically absent. Chronically absent is defined when a student misses 10% of the school year. For us in New Jersey, students must attend school at least 180 days. In Flemington-Raritan, that holds true. So if we have a student that misses 18 days of school, whether those absences are excused or unexcused, they are considered chronically absent. The study that was published in 2018 by the Baltimore Education Research Consortium shared with us that 9 out of the 10 students who missed 5 or more days of school in the first month went on to be chronically absent. And if poor attendance is allowed to persist, that really makes an effect on the students' learning. So in Flemington-Raritan, we are closely monitoring students that are consistently absent and working with families to make sure that the students attend school. Certainly, if a child is sick, we want the child to stay home. All of our experts tell us, our nurses, our district physician tell us that if a child is sick, they need to stay home. Our student handbook, our school policies, our guidelines, as well as the professional advice by these professionals tell us and remind us, if your child is sick, keep them home. But if they're well and they're healthy, get them to school because every day counts. You can read more about chronic absenteeism and information from Attendix Works in the written portion of the superintendent's newsletter. So second, let's talk about our American Rescue Plan allocations. So the American Rescue Plan allocations, they're otherwise known as the ESSER funds, and you'll hear educators talk about those two terms synonymously, ESSER or American Rescue Plan. New Jersey was the recipient of more than $2.7 billion in elementary and secondary schools emergency funding, and this was otherwise known as the American Rescue Funds. It was the third major stimulus package that was enacted by Congress back in March after the COVID pandemic. In Flemington-Raritan Regional School District, we have appropriated our ESSER funds into multiple categories. These consist of providing mental health services and supporting the implementation of evidence-based full-service support for learning loss. Thinking back to our mental health and what have we done with there to support students, we've hired additional counselors at multiple schools in the district, including Francis A. Daymar, Robert Hunter, and J.P. Case. We've appropriated more of this funding to provide Tier 2 and Tier 3 services, which include small group counseling sessions and severe support for those students that really need it. And we've also appropriated funds into our summer learning and supplemental after-school programs. These have included classroom instruction and online learning after school hours. We targeted funds at the very beginning for those groups of students who have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic based on research from our Department of Education. Those students include children with disabilities, English learners, migrant students, students experiencing homelessness, and children in foster care. The district continues to consult with a variety of supporters to provide high-intensity tutoring. So if your child hasn't participated yet in maybe an after-school club or a summer learning opportunity, don't worry, there are still more opportunities available, some that will be happening in January in the winter months, and that will continue into the summer months. Additionally, the district has used ESSER funds to purchase reading consultants for students, as well as professional development consultants for teachers to support learning in language arts. We also purchased the NWEA MAP assessment, which all of our parents should be familiar with because our children have been using that. And the district uses that assessment information to track learning in 2 subject areas, specifically language arts and math. We also used funds from ESSER to support book clubs. We have teachers participating in professional development. I mentioned that we hired reading consultants, and we've also had evening programs that have been available for parents to provide support at home to their child as a learner. New Jersey directed $48 million of their stimulus funding to support the development and implementation of Tier 2 and Tier 3 support and mental health. I mentioned that at the beginning of this broadcast. Tier 2 is small group instruction, and Tier 3 is intensive intervention services. And each school district in the state of New Jersey received a minimum of $45,000 to support mental health for students and staff. In Flemington-Raritan, we also use some of this funding to support the partnership with Effective School Solutions that so many of our parents use, that provides additional social workers and counselors in some of our schools. Lastly, we are continuing to invest in proven high-intensity strategies such as high-impact tutoring to develop additional learning loss supports for students. We are making sure that our teachers have high-intensity curriculum to support them in the learning that they're providing with students, as well as we're continuing to look at other partnerships to bring additional supports for students. So all of that, we've got a lot that's happening. Finally, we're continuing to partner with some of our universities, the College of New Jersey, Rider University, and others that are local to provide other ways to address students' learning loss. So last, before the Minute with McGann ends, I want to highlight part of the written newsletter that's coming out because it includes a survey to get parents' feedback on our health and phys ed curriculum. Now, this is the topic that I've talked a lot about. I talked about it in the August newsletter before we even came back to school. There was a talk-a-latte that happened during the month of October where about 50 families got together. And then again, I talked about it in the October newsletter in the Minute with McGann. So I want to reassure parents like I did in October again. I want to reassure you that with the health and phys ed standards, the changes that are happening in our curriculum, that these are developmentally appropriate for kids. We are targeting our older grades in 7th and 8th grade, that they understand that there are diseases associated with risky behavior. Those are how we're targeting keeping children safe. We also remind parents again that you can opt out your child of these lessons. But first, I encourage parents to take a look at the curriculum because we've worked very hard, not only with the parents and listening to the feedback from the talk-a-latte, but we worked very hard with the parents who are representatives of our community on our school board to really take line by line the performance indicators and talk about how do we feel this instruction is best in Flemington-Raritan. So please, if you have questions, reach out to us. Take a look at the information that's provided in the written portion of the newsletter and share your feedback with us. Again, happy holidays to all of our families. I look forward to talking to you again as part of the December newsletter that will be distributed right before our winter break holidays. I hope each of our parents that are coming for parent-teacher conferences, which are beginning next week in our school, first on December 5th at J.P. Case and Reading Fleming Intermediate School, and then continuing through the week and beginning in our elementary schools on that Tuesday, which is December 6th, with parent-teacher conferences. All of our students have early dismissal on those days, beginning December 5th, only for J.P. Case and Reading Fleming, and December 6th with our elementary students through the end of the week, so that we give parents the opportunity to sit down with our teachers and talk about what's the learning that's happening in the classroom, and talk with us about where are the parts of our students' curriculum and instruction that there are still some challenges that we're looking to overcome. I hope that your teachers are talking with you about the NWEA assessments, and I'm sure they are. And if you have questions about that, please reach out to your building principals, because they have been diving deep into the data and doing a lot of conversations with me about specific learning instruction. Happy holidays to all of you. And again, I'm Superintendent McGann of the Flemington-Raritan Regional School District. And thank you for spending a few minutes of your day listening to the Minute with McGann.